Hello and welcome back to That Is Well. And this week we're doing once again another drinking episode, another episode of Drunk History. And yes, I did steal that from Comedy Central, so if they're watching, please don't sue me. I can't afford that. We did the last one we did with Erlend Hedegart, that episode 200. That was a great, fun episode. And recently we did a Never Have I Ever episode that was also a lot of fun. So we do love our drinking games here on this podcast. And then hey, it's Saturday by the time we record, so do we need another reason to drink? So cheers. And I should, because this episode is kind of unorthodox for the podcast because we don't actually have a historian on the podcast this week, but a rather good friend of mine and a fellow history buff. He's also a comedian. He has a open mic night in Bergen, for English open mic. So if you ever are in Bergen for some reason, God knows why, you should visit Brian Borough. It's every second Wednesday on in Bergen. So if you have for some reason are in Bergen, go visit him there. But he is a fellow history buff, and we talk a lot of history together whenever we meet or whenever we talk on Facebook or whatever. That's why I invited him here because I think we will have an interesting discussion tonight. So hello, Aaron. Welcome, Aaron Trainer Troy White, or as I call him, Mr.
Hello.
White.
Thank
So
you for having me.
never, it's my pleasure, my pleasure. Before we get started, what is it about history to you? What does it mean? How did you get, where's your interest in history? Where does that lie?
I mean, I just really enjoy stories. I just like hearing the general narrative of the world. How did we get to the place that we are right now? What were all the things
Mm,
that happened in the steps? And I also really enjoy looking at the patterns that you see again and again. Of course, they say that history repeats, but of course history doesn't repeat. But
mm,
you see echoes, you see patterns, you see the same things happening again and again. And I think the more
mm,
you know about history, the more it informs about your current present. So
mm. Now, let's begin with the current present, because how do you feel current present resembles history, especially you are American yourself, and you live in Norway now, and having lived in another country as well, from having gained also the history perspective, how do you feel about current events and comparing them to a certain part of our history that I know a lot of people like to compare what's happening now to.
I feel that this is a very leading question. You're pushing me into a very
It
specific answer
started right
already.
away.
Um, but I mean, I think the parallels are very obvious. I don't think we really need to stretch ourselves very hard to see the parallels between the current
Yeah.
situation in the United States and the later days of the Weimar Republic, naturally.
Mm.
Um, of course. I'm not a huge fan of Donald Trump. I'm very open about that. I think that he is a wannabe dictator that does not have the requisite shall we say, skills and qualities that you'd want in a dictator. Here's the thing. I think a lot of people are more open to having a dictator if they were competent, and Trump is absolutely not competent, and he's
Mm.
surrounded himself with loyalists who are also not competent. So we get the worst of both worlds. We have somebody that is trying to take absolute power, but also does not have the skill to wield that power. We are not dealing with Napoleon Bonaparte. Again, we are dealing with Napoleon the Third, potentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, well, Napoleon Third, he did do some great modernization work within the country, but he was shall we
Just a
say,
he lesser
foreign
Bonaparte.
relations disaster. But
Mhm.
that's might even be pretty similar. I think Napoleon Third and Trump are good
Mm.
parallels to each other.
Maybe maybe a less intelligent Bonaparte. Because Bonaparte actually did have some. I wouldn't say he is on the same low level as Trump. To be fair, I haven't read that much about Louis Napoleon yet. I have a biography that came out this year that I want to read, but yeah, I would say he's had at least somewhat intelligence compared to Trump.
Oh, absolutely. Here's the thing. But are you talking about Napoleon Bonaparte or Napoleon the Third?
The third, of course, the third, yeah.
No, it's hard when people have the same name. I can't say that I've read
Mm.
extensively about Napoleon III, but He was definitely, some say that he was one of the first fascists of all time. So, and
Mm.
he did a lot of great modernization projects.
Yeah,
I think he helped build the railroads in France and really helped push the inside of the country forward. But as I said, he was a foreign relations disaster, and ultimately that was what brought his own downfall, with starting wars he could not win.
mm. Now that we lost half of viewers, but by already started with the politics, I'm sure we lost like 50% of our viewers at this time. But let's continue. But because I want to ask you, well, as you and I both read, we don't limit ourselves to just one era of history. We both like to explore, the world history. And is there one era, but is there one era you find more fascinating than others that you like, oh, I can't wait to read about this era again, or I want to explore more of this era that I find that you find fascinating.
I mean, there's a lot of really fascinating areas of history, of course. I mean, I have a particular I think love is a terrible word, but I'm a really big fan of World War One. I think
Mm,
it's much more interesting in a way than World War Two. Um, it was the culmination of so many. Um, I mean, in a lot of ways it's what happens when Bismarck built this tapestry of treaties and, I guess, agreements with different countries, and
yeah,
then Bismarck was no longer in power, and then you had other people, lesser statesmen trying to take over this world, and it all fell apart.
yeah,
And I think, and of course, you have like the bunch of people that I think what's fascinating about World War One is that you have a lot of people that are living with a past version of what war is supposed to be, being met with the
mm,
reality of modern technology and how devastating that can be, because you had a point where the technology was greatly advanced
yeah,
beyond the tactics that they were using, and it resulted in such terrible death. We saw entire generations being completely decimated, and it's awful and terrible. And although it lacked some of the genocides of World
yeah,
War II,
yeah,
um, I think it's very uniquely fascinating, the First World War. But it gets forgotten because the Second World War was
yeah.
sadly even more riddled with insane
Destruction.
amounts of death, especially
Yeah,
civilian death. World War One, I think, was um, a lot of soldier death. But World War Two, that one really spread to the civilian level as well. Of course, we have the genocides and stuff
I
happening with
mean,
both the Chinese and
personally,
the
yeah.
Jews.
Like in World War One, we start with horses, and that we've been used for since the dawn of time as cavalry, and then we end up with tanks. Imagine having used horses for 1,000 years, and I wouldn't say they become obsolete in the span of 4 years, but the evolvement from going to horses at the beginning of 1914, and in 1918 you have the tanks going in on the battlefield. That kind of made, of course, like horses did kind of wouldn't become obsolete until the Second World War, but the involvement from those beginning with horses and ending up with tanks and bomber planes, the technology that came out of World War One has been it's a fantastic, it's just a fantastic. It's the testament to the war, I think, as well.
and
Even
and air warfare as well. I mean,
yeah,
you went from the first airplane about 10 years before the start of the
yeah,
war, and then suddenly there's actually an air battle.
yeah. And I think that what I don't know how American schools taught this, but in from my school or the places in Europe, but from my school, we taught that First World War and Second World War, the Germans were the bad guys and the Allies were the good guys. And I think the First World War, having read a lot more on this, it's not really as black as white as the Second World War is. I mean, obviously, the Second War Germans kind of were the bad guys in the First World War as well, but they weren't like Nazi bad guys. They weren't. It wasn't as black or white as we think of as Germans just being bad guys. They weren't any Nazi driven. What's the word for it? There weren't this ambition from Nazi Germany that came with them in the from the German side in the First World War. You know, you had they they didn't have this idea of a master race yet that the Germans would rule Europe. They had a plan, kind of I wouldn't say a solid plan, maybe, but I haven't read too much enough on this, but I wouldn't say it's not less black and white as the Second World War is in kind of just punching the Germans as a real. And again, I'm not saying they weren't bad guys after all, but the kind of were, but they weren't like Nazi bad guys, is what I'm trying to say.
I mean, the Nazis are a pretty good. They're a pretty good
Yeah,
bad guy because I mean, there's
yeah,
very little. It's very difficult to have any sympathy at all for the Nazi government
yeah,
of Germany of that period. It was very much a very directly racist, white
yeah,
supremacist. We think that we are the master race and
yeah,
we need to have more land. It was just
yeah,
explicitly imperialism within Europe, which of
yeah,
course, imperialism around the rest of the world is naturally okay, but imperialism in Europe is
yeah,
definitely not okay.
yeah,
And of course, you have the very clear genocide of the Jewish people, and that is definitely overshadows everything. So
yeah,
it definitely World War II is a very clear good guy, bad guy battle. That makes it very easy to ignore how anti-Semitic a lot of the other governments and a lot of the other countries on the other side were as well. Um,
mm.
but that's how it is. But World War One, I think it's definitely. I think
It's a bit
Germany
more
made a
gray
mistake.
area, I think.
I mean, again, Germany, they were the aggressors of that war.
Yeah,
They
I
figured that and again, as I said, like this is World War One was the result of a lot of complex,
yeah,
a lot of complex treaties, a lot of complicated, as I said, as I described it, a tapestry of foreign policy,
mm,
that just fell apart. Different people had different obligations. The German people had to support the Austrian people, and the Austrian people had to do something
yeah,
after the assassination of their
yeah.
crown prince.
I mean,
And
here's the interesting thing, though, about the assassination attempt, because I'm not sure what books you read here, but I discussed this on the top podcast before, but how Franz Joseph, I don't, it was, I think it was in June or late May, he was assassinated. I don't have the date in my head, so do forgive me for not remembering the date
I mean, it's
in
either the
my
beginning of
head.
July
Yeah,
or it was near
yeah, yeah.
July because, of course, the
And it
period
takes,
after his death was called
yeah,
the
it
July
takes,
Crisis.
yeah. It takes a couple of months before they actually get to declare a war on the Allied powers and Serbia, because they because the Ferdinand was very well liked in the Habsburg court. He married his wife could not become Habsburg queen, and it's had there are some historians today that think that had the Habsburg actually gone into Serbia immediately after the assassination attempt, they should have had some sympathy of the rest Allied powers, but they don't. They go maybe 2 3 months until August, end of August, something. I don't, again, do forgive me for not remembering the correct date on this, but they wait too long to kind of get sympathy and the ultimatum that it gives to Serbia before no, declaring war. And the First World War, the Great War, as I prefer to call it, kind of begin because so there's goes the sympathy. There may have been more sympathy, if according to some historians, had they actually gone into the Serbia and the kind of given the ultimatum and run into as a revenge almost immediately after the assassination. They would have had more sympathy than, say, when they actually did it a couple months later than after the assassination happened.
I mean, especially because
Yeah,
the ultimatum that they ultimately submitted for the Serbian government was not one that they could ever
yeah,
accept.
yeah,
So it's just I think they were really afraid about the retaliation from Russia because if I believe right, Russia had a very close ties with the Serbian people as well, and
Yeah.
there's definitely a big fight of who could possibly take over the Balkans. So I mean, it was a very, very complex chess piece
Yeah, and
to.
one of the reasons why they felt so close to the Serbians is because they were Orthodox, right? And they, after the fall of the Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantium, if you will, in 1453, the Russians kind of felt themselves the rulers, even though Mehmed II installed a patriarch in, Constantinople. They didn't really acknowledge this, so they kind of looked at themselves as the head of the Orthodox Church after the fall of Constantinople. So that's one of the reasons why they felt so aligned to the Serbian cross, because they felt like they were the protectorate of all the Orthodox in both Ottoman territory and now the Serbian territory. So from my knowledge, at least, so that's some of the reasons why the Russians did feel they had a serenity over the Serbians.
I mean, that whole region. I mean, Russia considered themselves to be the continuation of the Russian Empire. That's why they were
Mm.
the Tsars,
Mm.
their version of the word for Caesar. And yeah, they saw themselves as the continuation of the Byzantine Empire,
Yeah,
and so of course
the
that
third
region was.
Rome, as to say. Yeah, and the my next question, I'm sorry for jumping a little bit ahead, but I just my next question, and I asked this in my Never Have I Ever episode as well, but I want to ask you too. Is there any character that you, as you have read, that you used to respect, but that I'm gonna give a same answer to that episode, but is there any character that you kind of had a decent amount of respect for, but then you lost the respect of that history of that character as you read more about him, and the more you read about him, the less you have respect for him.
I mean, I think one that definitely is when I was a younger man, I really saw that Napoleon Bonaparte was just
Yeah,
this amazing guy. I mean, he had such control over the government. He was this amazing general. He took control of France post-revolution. He expanded the French borders. He defeated the what were the names of the fighting force in Egypt?
yeah, the Mamluks, yeah,
The Mamluks. He defeated the Mamluks with the tactics of where he did the squares. Like he had all of these great ideas and these great ways of doing it, and he basically ruled the empire by himself. He did a lot of the administrative work himself, and it just showed just how much
yeah,
one person with enough drive
yeah,
and enough hard work could really make a difference in this world. And you look at like, wow, France really expanded their empire. And I think as
mm,
a young person, I think you look at empires differently as a young person because you think like, wow, look at how much
yeah.
they've expanded. Look at
Like
how
like
much
the
they've
British Empire, for
conquered.
example. You see that they own 1/5 of the world. How cool is that? But then you see, they treated most of their participants, especially in Africa or India, terribly. So, yeah, I get what you mean.
But I mean, just in general, I think as the older I become and the more that I've traveled, the more you start talking to people, the more you realize how that type of imperialism is not a good
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
I think after a while you begin to see like actually Napoleon was actually an evil person when you really want to look
He
at
was
it.
a bully.
He was a bully. He was pushing people around. These people did not necessarily want to be a part of the French Empire.
Mm,
Um, so I think that's just in general, just the Alexander the
yeah,
Great, like these people that have the great after them. I used to see them as
yeah,
these wonderful rulers that did these amazing things, and then after a while you just realize no, they were just didn't have compassion. They didn't have
yeah.
any.
Peter the Great was also a bully and kind of a terrible person as well when
I think
you
a lot
read
of the
about
people
him.
that have the great after their name were a terrible
Yeah,
person. The more history I read, the more I realize if you have the great after your name, that means that you were really good at killing lots of people. And that seems to be
mm,
the main determiner of how you get
yeah.
the great after your name.
Also, it's interesting how I can't think of many Asian here and quote unquote heroes or figures that have gained the title great. I mean, I guess Tamerlane is kind of a great title, and he was a terrible person as well, but you never see
But Tamerlane gets the great
Genghis,
put after his
yeah,
name as well, I believe.
yeah. So Genghis Khan, for example, never get the great, and I'm not saying he this
I mean, but
necessarily
here's the thing.
deserve
If
it,
I think
but
if Genghis Khan was from France or from England or
yeah,
something like that, and he had accomplished the things that he had accomplished being from the West, he
yeah,
would be considered definitely one of the greatest rulers of Western
yeah,
times. But no, because he came from Mongolia, that means that he was actually an evil invader, and what he did
yeah,
was pretty comparable to what a lot of the other rulers from the West that we
yeah.
attribute as the great to
Yeah, and
did very
I'm
similar
not
things.
saying he wasn't a nice person either, because he kind of wasn't. But he's kind of a bit racist as well, but to use the name the Great, because like I said, you never see any, for example, to use a South American. Well, what's his name? But Simon Bolivar, for example, doesn't get the grade, or like we said, Genghis Khan or Kublai Khan, for example, and Kublai Khan was actually quite a good leader in the one dynasty in China, and he did great conquests, but none of them, or any Chinese leader, or Chandragupta, for example, in India. None of them get to be awarded the title the Great because no matter how, or you have Akbar the Great actually from the Mughal Empire. You do have the title of Akbar the Great, but other than that, I don't think there's too many outside of Europe that have earned the title the Great.
No, 100%. It's a there's definitely a bit of racism in that. I think
Yeah,
I mean it's not surprising. I mean a lot of those great titles were attributed by historians from the
yeah,
um 18th and 19th century, and that was not known as a non-racist time of this world.
yeah. Is there any part of history that that you thought you knew, but as you read more about it, like for example, things in the medieval era or ancient era that you thought you knew, but as you said, oh, it may not be the way that I thought if things were. Have you changed your mind on anything like that? If you know what I mean. Like for example, how you view them, say the medieval era or the ancient Rome or ancient Greece. Is there any way? Have you changed any perspectives in that area for yourself?
I mean, one thing that I've noticed, the more I read about history, I think we take a very, you want to say, if you want to use that ist suffix at the end of words as like racist, ageist, I think we have a very
Yeah,
modernist view towards the world. We like to think that as time goes on, that we are advancing as a civilization, both in our intelligence
oh, we're
and
lucky to be
our
alive in this
emotional
time.
growth and things like that. We like to think that we are, that the human species, the human society in general, is in a state of continuous growth over time. And
Yeah,
I think the more that I read about history, the more I realize that's not actually true. I think that ultimately, people are people. The situations around them have changed, but I think in the base form of how we are, that has not actually changed very
yeah,
much at all.
yeah,
And I think it's very easy to look at people in the past and you look at the superstitions or the beliefs and things that people
yeah,
have. Oh, all of the humors. You want to look at the four elements and things like that. And these people are just idiots. But no, they were basically reacting to the best of their knowledge, the best of that
mm,
their current philosophy and science had given them. And I think that if we I guess, are so fortunate as to live another few hundred years, which I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if we were to maybe travel forward into time and look at the future, we would look back at ourselves now and we would think, oh, we were so dumb. How could we
yeah.
possibly believe these different things?
And
But then,
especially with social media these days, like you have people like Alex Jones, RFK Jr., or other people like selling you these conspiracy theories, and you read more on YouTube or you watch some YouTube videos by right wing politicians or, believing, that for example, immigrants are the trouble, or, and we see this even in our Norway where we live today, where, some people think that, the right-wing parties are gaining power, for example, because of the conspiracies on the internet and social media. It's no more or less that to think, how flat earthers or, vacciners today kind of were like what people may have thought of dumb people 200 years ago, if you know what I mean.
I mean, we're at a dangerous time right now because it's very easy to spread information. I mean, when you
Yeah.
had a
I mean, imagine if
totally
Hitler had
insane,
the power that we have with social media in 80 years ago, 80, 90 years ago. Imagine if social media existed, what power Hitler might have had at the time, spreading misinformation or AI videos on the internet, what he could have done with that power.
I mean, if you want to look at it, like even there were a lot of people in Germany that still believed, even many years after Hitler was out of power, even after the horrors of the final solution got out amongst the general public, there's still people who believe that the Jewish people were worth less than
Yeah.
white Germans, and that type of racism never really went away. We're at this point now where just dangerous ideas can very easily be spread. If you were
Mm.
a nut job that believed that, that flat Earth, I mean, that's one that just comes
Yeah.
straight up
Yeah.
straight to my head because that's a very common conspiracy theory. But like if you had a guy that was saying the Earth was flat, they'd be walking around with a giant poster board that they'd be drawn with markers and say, "Hey, the Earth
Yeah.
is flat." And you look at that person and you're like, "That guy is crazy," and you would just walk on. But now that person can get a YouTube channel and he
Yeah.
can make a video and do his flawed science
Yeah.
experiments, and suddenly there's lots of people that believe what he says.
Yeah.
And it gives a way for people with dangerous beliefs to consolidate and find each other and become movements. And
Mm.
that's a very dangerous development. Donald Trump could have never developed 30 years ago because the information infrastructure just was not the same at that
Yeah.
point. Like if somebody came out and you're like, oh yeah, this guy's I mean, everyone knows that he's a racist. There's lots of people that have accused him of these crimes. There's
Yeah.
he believes a bunch of BS, but he wants to be president someday. Like in the
Yeah.
90s, he wouldn't have gotten nowhere. Bill Clinton, he almost got removed from office because he lied about getting a blowjob.
Yeah. And it's as funny as it is to watch some of these nut jobs, on Instagram when we share clips with each other sometimes, and as funny as it is to watch some of these nut jobs kind of get crushed and humiliated, on channels like LBC in the UK, or the guys that I don't remember the names in the head, but there's some D and something, or the other guy that does some of this interview MAGA people. It's as fun as it is to, watch some of these people get destroyed at most of the time. It still gives them a platform. The right wing people still get a platform, and that's kind of the dangerous part. To, spread these ideas, and ideas of 9 of 10, one might actually agree with them, and then they get to grow bigger and bigger, and that's the dangerous part, that one person, one out of 10 person who actually agree with him, and it's kind of start to, yeah, he's not wrong though, and then you start, of course, have bots as well now, but Russian bots but it's one. That's the one guy might actually be the most concerning part in all of this, even if 9 out of 10 know that what the guy, not right-wing guy, is saying on this podcast or interviews on the radio, whatever, is bullshit. It's that one guy that can, actually get a voice, because even right-wing people are the most loudest, especially online, or and that makes it seems like they are in the majority, even though we know they're not. But in my opinion, that's one of the most dangerous things out there, because they are so loud as they are.
It's really, I think it's a really dangerous idea to say that the right-wing people are the loudest. We don't really know
Mm,
who the loudest are because so much of our access to information is
yeah,
determined by algorithms that are beyond
yeah,
our control. We don't know how how much people are talking. We don't
yeah.
know what the other side is necessarily saying, or we don't know what our side is saying. We really have no access to other people's worlds because
But
so
I
much of
think, I'm
our
sorry for
access to
interrupting
information
you.
is being curated by an algorithm.
Yeah. And I'm sorry for interrupting, but it's obvious now that, at least in the recent year, that social media favors highly right-wing posts or right-wing bloggers or influencers. So they do get a higher voice than what maybe the left-wing influencer or commentator might get.
I mean, because I think a lot of right wing commentators, right wing trolls, they just generate more
Yeah,
engagement
yeah.
from the right. If somebody on the right wing posts something, I think liberals are more likely to. Let's just put it this way. I think a lot of liberals are more open to the idea that, we need to come and attack them with facts. If somebody comes in and says something completely insane from the right side of things, you have all the left-wing people there saying, well, actually, if you look at the facts, this is actually not true. But then
Hmm.
at the same time, they're also getting engagement from the right-wing side as well. That's saying like, oh, you're so right. See, oh, screw the libs and
Yeah,
things like that.
yeah,
But I think a lot of left-wing people, when they post something that right-wing people don't agree with, a right-wing person would just say, that's BS and just move on.
yeah. Brock, is this
Um,
true?
this is wrong. That's not right.
Yeah,
You're an idiot. Screw Biden. You
yeah.
love Biden. F
Trump is
Biden.
on your mind 24/7.
Let's
Ha
go,
ha ha.
Brandon. I mean,
Yeah,
I try not to argue with people on the right
yeah.
on I try not to argue with conservatives, but it just seems like conservatives are not coming with any sort of logical arguments. It's very rare that I come
Mm.
across a
Yeah,
conservative that has a well-reasoned argument that has actually done, quote, their own research. I hate that phrase, but people have
yeah.
actually looked into the facts and actually kind of know what's going on. Unfortunately, I think there is a lower intelligent level on the conservative side. And
Hmm.
I mean, I don't,
Hmm.
I mean, of course, everybody's going to think that their own beliefs are superior. That's just a natural way of being. But I feel that a lot of liberals try to address these situations with facts, and a lot of conservatives seem to address these situations with their emotions. I
Yeah,
think well-reasoned people, they're just going off their gut and they don't really know what's going on,
yeah.
and they're very
We
poorly informed.
we kind of derailed from history and to modern politics, so this is more of a politics episode, I realized, than a history one. But I guess it's kind of relevant anyway. But so let's continue with what we thought about. But you are from Missouri, is that right?
No, I'm from Minnesota,
Minnesota, that's
but I
it.
do have family. I have a lot of
Yeah,
roots in Missouri. That's where
yeah.
my father's family is from.
But growing up in your part, is that a Republican area? And I'm not too familiar with the current state, that part. But is there a Republican area in your part of town?
I mean, the difficult part about the United States is that we don't really have regions that are. I mean,
Mm,
it's really easy to look at the map and see the red and the blue and think like, oh, this is a red
yeah.
state, this is a blue state, but that doesn't actually express the nuances of the political situation in the United States.
Mm,
I think the conservative liberal shift is more of a urban rural distinction. So I grew up in a rural part of Minnesota, so that is predominantly Republican, and they have mostly been in favor of Donald Trump. It's been very uncomfortable going back to visit after Trump and hearing people talk about that. But if you go into the cities, it's very, very Democrat, very, very more on the liberal side.
mm.
So
It's more because it's rural, sorry, rural areas
rural,
and
that's a very difficult word to
rural,
say
yeah,
for
rural. I'm not that drunk yet, but rural areas, because they are more white majority in the rural areas, or do you think that's partly why they are mostly Republican, that they are, I'm not gonna hesitate to say redneck, but the lower working class that is the majority of the rural areas, so and more in the cities you have more informed people, to put it that way, that maybe not necessarily watches Fox News all the time, but that are more liberal in rather than, and you have the conservatives mostly because how you have less information available on the rural areas. You get what I mean. But yeah, what are your thoughts there?
I have to say this complete honestly. You have paused for a for approximately 1 minute, minute and a
I
half.
think
So if
so.
you asked a question in the meantime, I did not actually hear it.
Oh, and so I really didn't okay, so let me repeat the question. So do you think that, in the rural areas, rural areas, that, they are less informed, and, that they are not as more conservative in the rural areas than, say, in suburban areas, and more because the majority may be of white population rather than in the cities where you're more diverse and you're more open. I'm not saying necessarily everyone is, but that's my perception of this, that there are more conservatives on the countryside because they are less informed. Maybe not everyone necessarily watches Fox News in the city in the cities and have more information available to them. Even before social media, you have more newspapers available, you have more options there. So do you think that's partly why there are more Republicans in the I can't say that word for some reason. Rural
We just we
areas.
don't actually expect that non-native
Yeah.
speakers can actually say the word rural because we cannot
Rural.
say the word rural.
Rural. From
Rural,
North, yeah.
rural. No,
But you
I
get my
think it's really
question.
unfair to say that they are less informed. They have equal access to information that
I
anyone
mean,
else
today,
does
yeah.
today. In the past, you could have made that argument. You can't really make that argument now. You have to look at it that it's very clanny. You're going to if everybody else is watching Fox News, you're going to be watching Fox News. And Fox News is the dominant uh, news source in these areas.
Mm,
And I particularly I love going in and actually reading Fox News and seeing the way
mhm,
that they report current events. Um, you can get a
mm,
really fascinating view and a really deeper understanding of why Trump was elected if you actually go in and read Fox News during some of these big things. It's not that they don't mention the same things that are happening in the world, but their spin on it is very different.
mm. And I
They
think,
portray things in a
yeah,
very positive way. They'll be instead of talking about a sex scandal on the Republican side, they will be talking about a some other scandal on the Democrat side.
mm. Or how it's Biden's fault that Trump did something.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I know you haven't seen the latest season, but I just want to bring this up as well. I think it would be interesting for historians to go back and look at the TV show South Park as a social commentary on the 21st century society as a whole, because it will be a news source for historians, I think, to just look at American society through the eyes of South Park and realize how accurate and how well they depict these things, events that are happening, and how well I think actually South Park might be, and this might sound silly, but I think it might be a great historical source for future historians to study since the 21st century, 2020s, or 2000 to 2020s,
I
even
mean, the
for,
great thing about South Park is they put their episodes together so quickly. So
yeah,
a news story will happen that week and they'll have a new episode out.
yeah,
It's something about that particular news story out the very next week. So if you want to get a time capsule of what's happening in the United States,
yeah.
watching South Park is not the worst way to do it. And now they've had basically 30 years of operating that way. I think the first couple seasons weren't too political or weren't too grounded in
Yeah,
current events, but I think from season 7 or something like that on, so you have 2 decades of them basically making commentary upon the biggest news events of
mm.
that
It
week.
will be a
Um,
historical source, I think.
I
Honestly.
mean, it's pretty ironic that the people that got their got their start from making a bunch of fart jokes are
Yeah,
actually might be one of the best sources of literature in the future, and
yeah,
I think that's really cool. I mean, it's the South Park is wonderful satire. They've always been wonderful satire, and the best thing about it is they've never been particularly rooted to any political side. I mean, they're
yeah.
very clearly
Maybe
anti
more so
Trump.
recently
Yeah,
than
recently, I mean, it's pretty easy to be anti Donald Trump right now
yeah,
because it's the Trump regime has is a they've become a fascist regime that
yeah,
is completely incompetent, and one cannot help but be against them. If you
yeah.
still support Donald Trump right now, I don't know what else to say. You are a fucking moron.
Hmm.
Apologies for swearing in your podcast, but
That's fine. That's
but if,
fine.
at this point, if you're still supporting Donald Trump and his administration, you are either in their pocket directly or you're stupid.
Hmm.
And I don't mind saying that out loud. It's look what's going on.
Yeah. So I think we're gonna round up the but how do you think? And I know it's easy question, but yeah, and historians have already, of course, formed their opinion on current events. But how do you think 100 years from now people will look back at the 2020s and view our time today?
I mean, it really depends on what direction society takes. We're seeing a big far right reaction to a lot of the quote woke things that are
Hmm.
that were dominating in the last decade. We're seeing the rise of far right-wing parties in Germany. I mean, Norway's going to have an election, or they're in the middle of an election now. I guess
Yeah.
the Norwegian election stretches over a longer
And I
time, but
think
I
this is
mean,
a really important
FRP
one
is
as well.
looking quite good right now.
Hmm.
Um,
Which
Not
is
in
concerning.
good as in that I want to vote for them, but good in that they seem to be doing pretty well.
Hmm.
Um, so it really depends on what direction things go. I mean, Trump is going to die. I mean, he's an old man. There's not much time left. And after he dies, it's the question is what's going to happen? Is the movement going to die, or are more
There's hoping.
competent people going to take over that role and take over
Yeah.
his cult and continue on with the roots that are put down by Project 2025?
Hmm.
Like, so it's going to be hard. It really depends on what direction history goes.
Yeah.
Um, I would hope that history looks upon this a lot of the stuff that's going on unfavorably. I mean, we have some even that we have a lot of big wars going on. I mean, what's going on in Ukraine is awful. What's
Yeah.
going on in Palestine right now is awful.
Yeah.
Um, but history's had a lot worse. Not to
Yeah.
downplay the incredible suffering of both of those wars, but we've seen some pretty horrible things. If you want to look at things on a broad historical perspective, um, especially post 20th century,
Yeah.
these conflicts seem small in comparison. There's a lot
Yeah.
of horrible things going on around the world that have a similar level of death and destruction that aren't getting reported. What's
Yeah.
going on in Sudan is just absolutely terrible, but nobody's
Yeah.
talking about it.
Yeah.
So
But yeah, I think that doesn't sound right. I mean, and of course we should be aware of it, but I think it was again, newspapers and media always been about what's the stories that sell right, and I don't think, sadly, I don't think people are care or about the events in Sudan, rather than because we heard so much about the things going on in Palestine, and rightly so, in my opinion, rightly so. We have heard have are more knowledgeable about the events there and in Ukraine because it's closer to home. But whereas, and it's, but I think it's mostly the stories that sell the viewers. And sadly, I think that is the driving points in this situation.
I mean, money talks. I mean, news reporting is always based on what sells most, and that's the reason why
Yeah,
Donald Trump dominates the news thing because no matter how you feel about him, it's entertaining.
yeah, and yeah, and it's in the end, it's always come down to money. And nothing really. I mean, I'm sure some of the reporters are passionate about what they do, but in the end, the newspapers editors they care more about the money rather than what actually going on in where they should report. Like for example, we never hear about what's going on in Ta Afghanistan anymore after the Taliban took over. Really, for example, we haven't heard almost anything from there recent years. But for just one example, since they pulled out, and we know
No, I know
that not.
very, very little about what's happening in
Yeah,
Afghanistan. I haven't even gone out of my way to find out.
yeah, and we know it's not good by any means, but still, we know it's not a good regime. But that's just one example that I can think of that we should hear more about, but we don't. And again, it's what sells. For example, what is China sells stories sell like what the Xi and Putin meeting or Kim Jong-un meeting. They are the stories that sell because they are the most sadly interesting people. For example, Nigel Farage in the UK, he gets a lot of media attention because we discussed this on the podcast before, he's charismatic. And even though he's a horrible politician, in my opinion, he, unless unpatriotic as he can be for Britain, he still sells and he still gets media attention because he is charismatic. He has the charisma of, what's that and they know how to operate again. Always when you see right-wing politicians, they know how to operate current media. They know how to operate. They know, Hitler, for example, he was one of the first to use an airplane to tour Germany when he was to campaign to become a politician in the Reichstag. He knew was one of the first to use airplane to tour the country. And we see Nigel Farage in the UK using TikTok, for example, as an example to get his message out to younger people because he knows, and then Hitler knew too, that young people are the ones that are the future of Germany, young voters. So that's how they reach people because they know how to know how to manipulate media. They know how to manipulate current events that are going on and use it to their advantage instead of blaming for example, what we see today. Instead of putting the blame on, you know, the millionaires who actually are causing harm and that are the ones who doesn't give you a raise or make you work for minimal wage that they put instead of putting your wage to them, why don't you give them a job or why don't you do this? They put the blame on the immigrants that come here. And yes, I do think that there should be a better way to process the immigration, but to say that is an overextent of immigration crisis, that's ludicrous, and they know it, and we know it. And that the boats that for example, coming into the UK is a bit massive problems on the welfare or hospital or hotels or what have you. It's just right-wing propaganda in most cases. It is right-wing propaganda. Because we know that immigrants are the ones who most likely least likely are the ones who are the problem, the crime, because they want to stay in the country. They want to get a job. They want to get green card. They're not the ones who live on the welfare of the country. They're not the ones stealing your money. They are the ones who try to get a job, and most of them. I've worked with a lot of immigrants, and I know this. So I have nothing but respect for immigrants.
I
And
mean,
yes,
I myself am an immigrant.
yeah, yeah.
Like even for
But you're
myself,
not a
there's
color. You're not a color immigrants, and
no,
there
no,
is
no. And
yeah,
I mean, I think there's a lot of people, a lot of, as you say, colored immigrants, if we want to say that. I think they struggle a lot in Norway because they're not. they don't get accepted as quickly as
Yeah,
I do. Because if I don't actually say anything, I do look Norwegian. I'm blonde
yeah,
hair, blue eyed. I do have English and Swedish descent, so I can
yeah.
pass in that's being
And you
very
speak the
speaking
language as
that's
well.
speaking very very Norwegian English. But I fit in very well in Norwegian culture, and I do speak Norwegian, and I work in healthcare, which is a very high demand area. So, I mean,
Ironically,
when
a
people
very
are,
immigrant type job, to put it,
yeah,
actually.
I mean, there's a lot of immigrants that work in that type of job, but there's also a lot of Norwegians that work in that
Yeah,
job as well. So we don't want to get too stereotypical
yeah,
about that
no,
type of thing. But I don't go to some of the protests and some of I'm not as outspoken politically as I would be back in the United States as I am here in Norway as an immigrant
yeah,
because I don't want to get sent back to the United States because I don't want to live there. I want to live in Norway. I love
yeah,
Norway. This is a place that I think is
yeah,
absolutely wonderful. I have a great life. I don't want to screw that up. So I'm not going to go commit crimes. I go out in the
yeah,
city and like, oh, my friends are going and smoking a joint. Do you want to hit the joint? No, I'm not going to hit this joint because if a cop stops me while I'm hitting it, I get sent back to America. Like, why would I do
yeah,
that? That's stupid. Like,
yeah.
so I mean, it just again,
And
I'm
I
not
think
the type
most
of person.
immigrants
I'm
feel
not the
that
type of person
way.
that commits crimes anyway. I'm not that type of person. I'm not a
Yeah,
gang member. But at the same time, even some small petty crimes I wouldn't
yeah,
do. Even non-crimes, as I said, like protesting political movements, things that I'm not very politically active in Norway because I don't want to make a stir because I want to stay here.
yeah. And
And a
even
lot of
the
immigrants are the
minority
same.
among the minorities that come in are violent criminals. There are, and we should acknowledge that there aren't. Not everyone is perfect. I mean, I am obviously, but
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
there are. I'm just kidding. Kidding. But yeah, not all immigrants are necessarily friendliest immigrants, and we should acknowledge that there are some that do commit crime, but most of them just want a better
They're
life.
absolutely violent criminals coming through immigration,
Yeah,
and you
but
will not
most
pick
of
them up
them,
even through the best of vetting. There are violent criminals that are going to slip through the
yeah,
cracks and come into this country. But the thing is, most people, if they want to be an immigrant, if they want to go to another country, they've chosen to go to the country. They said, "This is a place I want to be," and they will do what they can to be in that country, which you cannot say the same about
yeah,
native people. That's the thing. Native citizens, they came to their country through the lottery. They were born in that country. They did not choose that country. They were given that country through birth.
yeah,
Immigrants have chosen to come to the place that they've chosen.
yeah.
These are people that want to be in this country.
And sadly, we see also that even second or third generations aren't easily accepted as, for example, Norwegian, British, or American. If you are colored, it's sadly most people are not accepted, even as a second or third immigrant generation of immigrants. And that's a problem we should address. And that, if you feel or if you were born, for example, in Norway, UK, or you should be identified as English, you should also identify yourself, be proud of your heritage as well. But shouldn't have a problem identified as English or Norwegian or American if you were born in said country. And most, at least right-wing people don't, or and even a lot of non-right-wing people sadly don't acknowledge that. Oh, where are you from? No, you're not Norway. From Norway, you're from, for example, Pakistan or India or Eastern Europe. You're not Norwegian, really.
Hvor kommer du fra, egentlig?
Yeah, yeah,
It's a bit to bring a bit of
yeah,
Norwegian
yeah,
to translate. Where are you from?
yeah, yeah,
Actually.
yeah,
And you get that a lot. Like I definitely talk to people. I mean, there's people that have been born in Norway. They have a parent that's Thai. I think that's a for people
yeah,
that are of your generation, you'll get a lot of people that are first generation Norwegians, but they have a Thai parent. And you ask
yeah,
them like, "Oh, where are you from?" And they're like, "Oh, well, I'm Thai." And even Norwegians, people that were
yeah,
born in Norway, born and raised here, they're
yeah,
not anything else. If you ask them where they're from, they will say, I'm Thai. They won't
yeah,
say they're Norwegian. And I think it's really sad because They are Norwegian. I mean, of
Yeah,
course, I'm from the
in
United
my
States,
view,
but we
like
are
even
a
even in,
mixing
yeah,
pot. We are a mixing pot of lots of different
yeah.
nationalities. So
And the
so
king gave a wonderful. I'm not really a monarchist by any means, but I think the king gave a wonderful speech a few years ago. Just look up the Norwegian king about. I don't remember when he gave this. I think it's 2 years ago, where he gave that thought about how we are a country that believes in. We are people like men who like men, and we are people who are from different countries. We are people who are, you know, he gave all this speech about how diversity actually completes Norway in a sense, and how, immigrants help. I don't remember the speech in my head or the translation of the speech, but he gave a wonderful speech about how, you are Norwegian no matter where you're from, basically. That's what he tried to say.
I mean, do Norwegians really want to eat fårikål and lox to every meal? They don't. I mean,
I mean, salmon is good
what
though.
is the
Salmon is good.
I mean, it's not to say that they're not good. It's not to say that these foods are not
Yeah,
nice. But I mean, most Norwegians will eat taco on
yeah,
Friday. Most
yeah,
Norwegians like Thai food. Most Norwegians want to eat pizza. None of these
yeah,
things are Norwegian.
yeah,
Immigrants give flavor, they give diversity, they give something more to your country. I mean, I think
yeah.
that immigration is always a plus. And if you want to look at a country like Norway, especially where we have a negative birth
Yeah.
rate,
Imagine the
we need
imagine a
immigrants in
country
Norway, or
without
else
kebab.
the health system's going to fall
Yeah,
apart. The social welfare system's going to fall apart. We need people to come into this country, or else it's all going to fall apart. The system is based upon the idea of a growing population, and Norway
yeah.
doesn't have that on its own. So you need the immigration, or else it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and imagine where we're gonna get kebab from if there were no immigrants.
Exactly.
And there was a problem with this during Corona. We're gonna round up soon, but just just Corona is, for example, an excellent example of this because the farmers where you have so the strawberry farmers or rust or the potato farmers most of them use Pol at least where I worked they use Polish farm for help workers, for example, that came in to the country and came in here and worked for one season when the harvest happened, and or Eastern European people. And there was a shortage of this when COVID happened because they couldn't travel to Norway because of the quarantine, and there were actually for problems because local people, the local population, they didn't feel like this job as we need them. This is a job that no, I'm too good for this job. And it's they had actually a problem harvesting the strawberry or the potatoes because a lot of people felt like I can't do this job. This is beneath me. And when I worked in the UK, I worked in London for about a year. I worked in warehouses, and we stored containers, with different stuff that went all over the world to Africa, wherever have you. And most of the people I worked with were immigrants from Eastern Europe or India, and not one single. A few of those who came were second. A few of the local Londoners were second in generation, immigrants, and for one first generation immigrants, and even for them, this was job was beneath them. They didn't last one day in those jobs that we did. I actually did not last more longer than some of the local work people who worked there. So imagine where those jobs would have gone if we didn't have immigrants, because it's ludicrous to say that immigrants are taking the jobs. No, they're taking the job that you don't want. And it's a sad truth, but it's the truth that you wouldn't last a day in those jobs that they did, like cab driver, hotel maid, or what have you, working the harvest in the summertime, in the fall. You wouldn't last a day out there even if you tried. So it's ridiculous to come here and say that they took their jobs. It's ridiculous to even think that and I have nothing but respect for those immigrants who come here, and most of them send money back to their families. Half that pay goes back to their families at home. For me, I have nothing but respect for those who actually come and work hard for the pay that they make.
But now you're addressing a certain thing that where I'm one of those people. I believe that if you are living in a country, you should be, if you're taking a wage from a country, you
Yeah,
should putting that wage back into that country's economy.
yeah.
Not that I have anything against people sending some money home to their family. Uh, we all need to eat, but at the same time, I do believe that if you're living in a country, you should be trying to put as much money back into the economy as possible.
Yeah, that's fair, obviously. I mean, obviously you have taxes, that's unavoidable,
That's
but
why you're here. You're
yeah,
here to
yeah,
benefit that country's economy. The
yeah,
work that you do, of course, is very important, but also I think that you need to be paying your fair share of taxes, and there are a
yeah.
decent number of immigrants that are choosing to live slightly under the requisite number of days to call this a tax home so they can pay as few taxes as possible. And I am very much against that. So, in a
But
lot of
also
ways,
you
I'm
have to kind
very
of
conservative
understand
views
the
towards
yeah.
immigration as an immigrant, but
But also again, I think you should understand their point of view as well when you come from a poorer country or re region and you're only working for a minimal amount of days. You also have to kind of understand their point of view as well, I think. And I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. I think they should pay if you work around a certain amount of tax, what is required for tax for the tax that you have to pay. I also kind of understand their point of view. If you come from a poorer country that, and you don't distribute maybe a year pay for them. So I'm maybe over exaggerating, and I hope I don't come out too racist in this explanation. But I think we have to also understand from their point of view as well. If you come from a poor region and trying to, help make a better life for your family back home as well, I think you have to understand that part as well.
100%, you take 20% of your wages in Norway and send it out
Mm,
to another country, you're basically giving people maybe 100% of what
yeah,
you're giving other people back at home in a 100% job.
yeah.
So I'm not against sending money to other countries when you're immigrant,
I mean,
naturally.
but my point is,
But
that like about that was, that they actually work hard and contribute to their families back home as well as making, that was kind of my point. I mean, you don't send that money back home to your family in the United States, for example. I bet you don't send the money you earn, for example. So just think about, when I lived in the UK, I didn't send any money back home to my family. I just mostly just drank up all the beers and hookers. Minus the last part. Minus the last part. That was a
you're doing
joke.
the good work as an immigrant. You're spending
Yeah.
money on hookers, on
Yeah.
UK hookers, UK beer, supporting the local economy as you should be doing as
The
an
hooker
immigrant.
the hooker beer hooker part was a joke, by the way. Just I'm just saying. I'm just
No
saying.
judgment, no judgment.
But yeah, I think actually on the hooker part we don't call it quits for today. And it's a great way to end it on hookers and blackjack and whatever else you may play. Beer and hookers and blackjack. I think that's a perfect way to end it in this podcast. Before I go, of course, if like I said in the beginning, you run a comedy club in Bergen. So if we what is it called? And where if for some crazy reason you find yourself in Norway and you want to have a comedy on a Wednesday night, set every second month, where can people find you? And
If for
why
some
should
reason you find yourself in the most touristed city in all of Norway, no, it's called English Comedy Club. We run it at a pub that's called Brian Boru Irish Pub. We do it every other Wednesday. Our next show will be, I guess, the 10th of September, so we're running every 2 weeks after that. But a lot of people might be listening to this years in advance, so maybe we've altered the schedule slightly. I perform at other places as well in both Norwegian and English. I talk about a lot of different stuff, not just the immigrant experience and not just history, but lots of other things in stand up.
Mm.
Um,
So
check it
I
out.
would, yeah. I actually want to continue a little more. Usually I end this, but one thing I realized we forgotten to talk about is a very famous English comedian who is, and I'm so sorry for going on when I said we should end, but I want to bring up Eddie Izzard a little bit before we go, because speaking of English comedy and history, what what is some of your favorite bits by Eddie Izzard that he has done? Because he is a master of telling, making history a joke.
I mean, the Eddie Izzard, I mean, he was an influence on
He
me, of
is.
course,
He
my
still
aesthetic
goes.
style. And he still is, I should say,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
prefers she at this point. Um, but yeah, I think she's absolutely talented comedian. I love the way that she uses history in her stand-up. I Dressed to Kill, I think that was a special. That was one of
Mm.
the formative stand-up experiences for me as a child. And because there was so much history in it, there was so much, and you feel smart watching it, of course.
Yeah.
I love that joke about the Falkland Islands. I think that was one of my
Mm.
favorite ones. Like, oh, we can't give the Falkland Islands back. That's strategic sheeping ground.
Yeah.
Like, that's one of my favorite lines. That
That
special
that
is
joke works really well with Greenland and Donald Trump, I think. She should just rebrand that with Greenland and you have the same thing.
But I don't actually think that she might find the same level of success now that she did
Yeah.
in the 90s. Because I think people in the 90s were generally more informed about history. I think people were more
Mm.
interested in academic subjects than they are
That's
now.
ironic with all the podcasts going around on
Yeah,
history.
but I mean, I think that it's people are a lot more concerned about current events
Yeah.
than past events. Not to say that people are dumber, as I said earlier, I don't think people are any dumber now than they ever were. But I think people's focus is on different things. And I think people are more rooted in the present now and they don't care as much about history as they did in the past, where I think in the past people really did have a good basis in
Yeah.
historical facts. I think a lot of young people, if they were to watch Dress to Kill today, they would not think it was funny because they just would not get the references.
Yeah. I think my favorite, two of my favorite joke by Edison is the Latin joke. How oh, that's 5 minutes in Latin, and how it goes on. She goes on about talking about how the Romans, so they should talk gibberish, and then she had this whole conversation, and then she talked the English version, and then it goes on for like 3 seconds. And the flag part, how the British Empire came to be. And, do you have a flag? No, we do. And I don't remember the exact
Uh,
part, but the flag part is absolutely one of my favorite bits that she done.
I mean,
It's
my favorite
absolutely
joke from her, of
amazing.
course, is the "Did you
The
hear he's
Hannibal
dead?"
bit. Hmm?
Of course, people listening will not see it, but the whole like,
Yeah,
yeah, didn't you hear? They're dead. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. They're not dead. She kept that going for a long time. And
yeah,
for people who are listening to this who primarily know her as a female comedian, you have to realize that when we were growing up, the pronoun was he. So it is a bit difficult to talk about past stand-up
yeah,
specials when somebody was a he in the current now when they prefer to go
yeah.
by she.
I think she said, I think it
So
was, yeah.
there's no intention of misgendering. Um, is it does she go by
I would
Edie now?
absolutely love to have Eddie Izzard on the podcast because that would be fantastic to have her on the podcast and just discuss how to make history a joke. That would be absolutely amazing. To I think that would be an amazing episode because she is intelligent. She speaks like three, four languages. I think she's done stand up in Spanish. I think she's done in
She's
German.
amazing.
Yeah,
She ran I think like 30 marathons in
yeah,
a few months. Like it's an amazing person,
yeah,
incredibly talented comedian, incredibly talented
yeah.
actor. Just
I think it was a while ago. I'm not sure if it was Joe Rogan before he went conservative, but I'm not sure if it was Joe Rogan or another podcast or a talk show. But she talked about how she went like at least at that time she talked about how she was like boy mode on stage or something, and then girl mode outside or something. I'm not sure if that still applies, but she talked about how she kind of switched a little bit on both stage and you can already see in kind of in the dress to kill that she is trans because she wears this dress as well and she looks so really good in it. That's what I think.
I mean, no one, I mean, at that time where it's like people were unsure, like,
Yeah,
is this a gimmick? Is this an expression of her
yeah.
gender? Um, I
I mean,
mean,
that's
people
not the
like,
really the
oh, gender didn't
important point.
exist. Like, no one talked about gender before
Yeah,
2017, which is a complete BS.
yeah,
Gender, the differentiation between gender and sex had been there for
yeah.
long time before that, but just I think maybe the general population was not aware of it. But yeah, definitely. I think if she was performing now, if Dress to Kill came out, then I mean, people would be, yeah, I don't know
Hmm.
how people would look at that now.
She's one of those few comedians that I actually want to see live on if she
Oh,
comes to Norway.
100%.
I want to see her live, absolutely. Because she's
But
just one of the
I haven't seen
best.
any new material by her in a
No, I
long
don't think
time.
so. I think she's more on TV now, when I come to think of it. And she does a lot of one girl play. And she's this one person play from what I've seen on Instagram. She does one of, those one man play things where she done Great Expectations alone. I know I think she done Hamlet as well, like a one man show. I'm sorry for one man show, but yeah, I think she if she does comedy, and she does comedy as well, but I don't think she's been to Norway from what I know. But and I think we're gonna run it up there because we kind of derailed a little bit and just thought but I wanted to bring her up because one of her older specials and especially her history jokes, they are just one of the best. Her Hannibal set is amazing. And how Hannibal crossed the Alps, it's absolutely hilarious. So the way she does, the crossing of the Alps with her legs, what symbolizing how Hannibal crossed the Alps. I don't know how she does. I would love to have that amount of talent
I mean,
to do that
I'd love
way.
to work. I'd love to work in a lot more history into my own
Mm,
act, but I don't. I mean, I've established I have a great, deep interest in history, but I just don't think that current audiences do
yeah.
as much. You can try to make a niche career doing that type of stuff, and I think
It's not trying to do
in
that.
Hungary, actually, when I travel into Hungary and I do stand up in Hungary, I do a lot more history jokes. I think
Mm,
Hungarians are very, very obsessed with their history,
mm. Yeah.
and they work well
What,
there.
what, what's a Danish comedian called? The piano guy, Victor Borg. I mean, I don't think people would get if he did the same thing. I don't think he would be as famous today either. Perhaps even if he, I think it's the same thing. Like he's a classic, but I don't think anyone should ever do what he did today compared to 80s to 90s. But I think we don't run out of there because we derailed a little bit from what we actually talked about. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, again, thank you so much for coming. It's been a great pleasure to have you on the podcast today and this to talk about. Well, even though we talked more about current event, I just have kind of history by the point that time that this gets released because yesterday is kind of history already. So I guess we're kind of relevant in that way because what we discuss is kind of the past time. So I guess we're kind of relevant in a way. This has been with that aged well. If you are in Bergen, like as we talked about, please consider going and visit the English Comedy Club. They do Wednesdays every second week, like you said. So there's a great line of local and maybe even some international comedians as well. Are people able, if they feel the fun about, to go on and perform themselves, if they want to try to do jokes, if they have, for some reason, visit you? Are people allowed, if they came into to Bryanborough on a Wednesday, are they allowed to come and do comedy if they for 5 minutes or 2 minutes?
I prefer that people tell me before the night of the show that they're going to perform so I can plan around
Mm,
set up a lineup so that they're adequately sandwiched between two people that
mm,
I trust a bit more
mm.
than a random stranger. I've had random strangers come up and ask to perform the day of a show, and it's gone poorly every time. So if you feel like performing at our open mic English comedy night in Bergen, Norway, then I would prefer that you contact me
And you
before
get a
the night
free
of the
beer
show.
if you do. You get a free beer if you do as well, so it's worth it, even if you bomb. But thank you again. This has been That Aged Well. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, wherever you can find podcasts these days. So if you are on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. If you're on YouTube, leave us a comment and write about what you think about the current event. How do you think people will judge our current event in 200 years from now or 100 years from now? Well, how do will people look back and see our time? If you are on YouTube, like, share, and subscribe. My name is Alan, and I'll see you next time.